Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I see that some folks are still signing in for the annual meeting, getting their flowers, but we're going to start. I'm the Reverend William Lebwood. My pronouns are he and him. As we center ourselves for worship, I invite you to silence your phones if you're in person, to take a deep breath. Leaving the week behind. Let's do that one more time. Take a deep breath. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing, so that all together may one day know full justice. Together we care in community. Together we grow in spirit. Together we act for justice.
Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Christina Watts, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. This congregation is a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home where we inspire each other to live our values. Together, we care in community, grow in spirit, and act for justice. I hope you got a name tag, or have put your name on your Zoom name tag. If you need help with that, please let us know in the chat. If you aren't new to Accotink, look around. Do you see people that you haven't met or haven't spoken to in a while? These people like you and want to meet you. Help us live up to our mission to be a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home for all by reaching out and making a connection. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we stay for our social hour, online and in person, immediately after the service. And today we actually have our annual meeting that we encourage you to stay for after the service. And we're so delighted that you are joining us today. Welcome.
Something we're going to embody today as we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Flower Communion. So in Prague, in 1923, on June 17th, the Unitarian minister, Reverend Norbert Capek, initiated this flower communion that we're going to do today, that many Unitarian Universalist congregations celebrate, often either on Easter, sometimes on Mother's Day, or as we're doing to kind of close out our 10-month church year as we move into the summer. So it came to America in 1940. Maya Capek brought it, Norbert Capek's wife, when she was on a visit here. So in a moment, we're going to have you bring up the flowers that you have with you. Some of you brought them, some of you were given them when you entered the sanctuary, and we're going to set them here in these baskets. And I think the best way to do it is to go from the back. So rows in the back will go first, come down the center, and then go around the outsides to go back to your seats.
So we have our flower communion, and we have a few things set up here. I wanted to provide all of you and the little ones an opportunity to create your own flowers, as well as enjoy the beauty of our nature, our natural flowers. Does anyone have a special way that they make something, like out of tissue paper or anything special that they would want to share really quickly? Yeah, you want to show us or just tell us?
Sometimes for stems I use pipe cleaners.
Pipe cleaners for stems, yes. And you see we have that, and we have all colors of tissue paper. Yes?
Tissue paper to make the many petals.
That's really nice. Like all different colors tissue paper to make the petals? Yeah, very cool. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I'm going to show you a really quick way that I draw a flower. Super easy. I taught my third graders this. And let's just look. I'm using the number 8, right? So if I were to do this, right, it's the number 8. But I can also do that, right? Yeah. And then we could do this. And then maybe this. It's the beauty of art, right? And nature. We can do whatever we want. And there's a lot of creativity. So I'm going to invite all of you who would be interested to come up and take some paper, draw something on here, get tissue paper. We have stencils with every kind of flower you can think of, and just work on it throughout the service. This is kind of an interactive service. Again, focusing on our flowers. Revlev, can you lift up some of those stencils right there to just give an example? So, yeah.
I could take this back to my seat and make some stencils. I could make tissue paper flowers. I wish I didn't have to do all the stuff I have to do up here. Y'all get to have all the fun.
I thought about finger paints, but for all the moms and dads, I was like, I can't. So you're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. Do you want to invite them up from the back up? Yeah.
Yeah, so why don't we do, if you want to come and get supplies, why don't we start in the back, whoever wants to get supplies. And look, there's a little bee, appropriately, who decided to join us this morning on my script for our upcoming story, because we have all these pollinators here. So don't be shy. Also, you can come up whenever you want. We're going to tell our story now. So feel free to come up and get supplies whenever you want throughout the service.
Something to do.
Yeah, something to do. But maybe since we're going to start our story, quietly gather your stuff. All right. So our story, our first part of our story is from Jean Beretta. He's fine. For now. So Jean Beretta wrote The Secret Garden of George Washington Carver, and we're going to share that story with you, and then we're going to talk more about George Washington Carver's life later in the service from a different book. So our story begins in Diamond Grove, Missouri in 1874. No one knew about the garden George kept hidden on the Carver farm. No one saw how the child cared for his flowers and how much he loved them. When he watered the clovers, their petals curled up like a smile. The black-eyed Susans winked when he patted the soil around their roots. He sang to the dandelions, and they waved to him with their long leaves.
People used to tell him that growing flowers was a foolish waste of time. Why don't you grow something you can eat? Neighbors said. You can't make any money selling flowers, said his brother James. They're only good for attracting bees. Don't let flowers take you away from your chores, warned Moses and Susan Carver.
George was born in 1864. Like his mother and brother, he was enslaved on the Carver farm. While still a baby, George and his mother were kidnapped. Days later, he was found, close to death, and brought back to the Carvers, but his mother was never seen again. The next year, slavery was outlawed in the United States. Moses and Susan Carver did not have children of their own, and they raised George and his brother on the farm. George was a sickly child, which meant less time working and more time exploring. He filled the house with a steady stream of interesting plants and rocks.
Susan taught him how to be creative with the little they had. Nothing was wasted. Turkey feathers were used to make sewing needles. They made dyes from nuts and berries. They used plants and leaves for medicine.
Every day, George ran into the woods to discover something new. I want to know every stone and flower and insect and bird and beast, he said. His education was limited at home. George had only one book which he read dozens of times. I know this book by heart, he told Susan. I wish I could go to school with the white children.
Slavery had ended, but U.S. segregation laws still denied black people the same rights as whites. George decided to create his own classroom in the woods and studied the subject he loved most, nature. And no matter how much people discouraged him, he wanted to grow flowers.
He decided to grow them in a secret garden that no one could find and where they wouldn't tease him. It became a magical place for him. Tiny seeds went into the dirt and transformed into beautiful flowers. In his mind, the garden was a true gift from God, whom he called the great creator. Each day, George rolled the soil between his fingers to make sure it wasn't too wet or too dry. Some plants needed more rain, and some needed more sun.
Come here, you need a haircut, George said as he cradled a daisy in his hand and clipped off its dry petals. He spread them around the soil to help the flowers grow. At first, the gardening was difficult because he couldn't ask for help and reveal his secret. The more he experimented, the more he learned.
George studied each new season by painting the life cycle of the flowers. Berries were used to make paints. Twigs and grass were used to make brushes. He learned how to protect the roots through the winter so the flowers would be reborn in the spring. "Welcome back," he whispered to the tiny sprouts. It was a special garden and could have remained a secret forever. But eventually, George's generosity changed all that.
When George met a neighbor with a sick plant or flower, he offered to care for it. Part of his garden became a plant hospital. Wilting plants went in and blooming plants came out. No one could believe that such a small child had so many big ideas. "Here comes the plant doctor," they'd say whenever he'd pay a visit.
"Think of all the people I can help," he told the garden. It inspired him to see their flowers, all the different people's flowers growing side by side with his flowers. George breathed a sigh of relief, realizing there was no need to keep his garden a secret anymore. And he knew there was much to see and learn away from the farm, so at the age of 12, he said goodbye to his garden and set off on his own for a new adventure. I'm going to use the pronoun "key" for RB. Key has moved to my script for the story later on. Key is waiting and ready for when we get to the next part of the story. But first I want to talk about what we already explored. Do you think that growing flowers is a waste of time? No. No. I agree. Anybody think it's a waste of time? No. It's not a waste of time. What can a person learn from growing flowers? Patience. That's good. Shout them out. What else? Beauty. Hope. Kindness. Biology. Plant biology, yes. Gentleness. I'm going to say nurturing. Peacefulness. We could go on and on. Remember in our story that George Washington Carver probably learned all the things that we just named, but in particular, he learned what each flower needed. That some needed more sunlight, some more shade, some more water, some less water. Sophia Lyon Foss was an important UU religious educator in the 20th century. Now, in those days, most adults thought that a child's minds were like an empty jar that you filled with learning. In fact, some adults still think of children's minds this way today. But Sophia thought differently. She thought of children more like gardens, already planted with the seeds of possibility for learning and growing, and that the teacher's job was to provide the good soil and water and sunlight that a garden needs to grow. It was as if each child was a unique flower needing a different amount of sunlight or shade, a different amount of water. Any ideas what sunlight, shade, or water could symbolize that help a person's learning? What's a person who needs more sunlight? What do they need? More kindness. Kindness. Sunlight can be like kindness.
Maybe like more quiet.
More peace and quiet. I would associate that with shade, but it could be sunlight. More happiness to thrive and flourish in the sunlight of happiness.
Rays of generosity.
Say that again.
Rays of generosity.
Grace of generosity.
No, like rays.
Rays. Oh, rays. Thank you for clarifying. Rays of generosity, like the sunlight's rays of generosity. What about, so I said I thought the quiet was more like shade, though it could be like the sunlight, basking in the sunlight, in the quiet, on the porch. But anybody have other ideas about what shade could symbolize? Or water? Safety. Shade could be like safety. Rest. Quiet. Peace. What about, I think of the water as the knowledge. Maybe that's because I've spent a lot of time in Jewish community and the Torah is associated with water, the water of life, the water of wisdom. Any other ways that water could be what helps us learn? Praise. Maybe the water is the praise that you soak up to nurture you as you grow and learn. So, you named many of these things, a safe place to learn, books and supplies and music. Knowing when your actions are helpful and when they're not, you can get that reflected back to you from those in your life, both children, other children and adults. People can take you on field trips or adventures, just like George went out into the woods to plant his garden and to learn from nature around him. People can tell you stories. This, in fact, is what happens. A lot of this is what happens at Spring Mar, which is the preschool that shares our building during the week. And so I just want to lift up Spring Mar and the partnership we have with them and encourage you to tell people about Spring Mar, encourage them to send their children there. We've had many people who've become members from first finding us through Spring Mar. Michelle's raising her hand. They share this philosophy with Sophia Lyon Foss about nurturing the garden of the child who already has so much to offer and just needs that to be nurtured into growth. Because no one can give a child wisdom or spiritual growth. Those grow from within. People experience the world for themselves with their own feelings from seeing and touching and doing. This is what Sophia Lyon-Foss believes. This is what we, and many of us at least, as Unitarian Universalists believe. So may we continue to nurture and grow the flowers that are each and every one of us, and all the other plants we might be too. It's not only about flowers. So I need some folks to come up here because we're going to actually give embodiment to this action of growing and nurturing. So who wants to come and do a little movement prayer with me? Come on up, come on. Okay. You can face here or face me. Is this it? Just one volunteer? Come on, come join me. We're going to grow some. All right. So first we're going to be the sunlight. You can do this from your chairs too. So you can make yourself a sun and kind of turn, or you could be like the rays of the sunlight going whoosh, and you can see the sun going so far away out to all the people. Don't get too close to me, I'm burning hot. But if you're far from me, the light is good for you. Yeah. Or maybe some of us should be the flowers. Maybe they should be, actually you all should be the flowers. So soak it up, soak in the sunlight. What else do we need? Water, which usually comes in the form of rain. So how could you make rain? And yet, I like this, or little fingers, or a little drip, drip. Yeah. So soak up that water, soak up that rain. All right. And then even air. Can we make some gentle breezes? That color and fragrance feeling from that song we just sang, wafting with the beautiful sense of pollen and flowers, sneezing along with it, perhaps. All right. So actually, can you over there? We're going to actually become the flowers now. So can you make yourself a seed, and can you be sunlight and rain and breeze for us, like a mixture of all of those, and help us grow? Okay, don't grow until they do a good job of giving us what we need. I think they're doing a pretty good job. What do you think? What, you think they need to do it more? A little more? A little more? Okay. And then push yourself out of your seed and reach up and reach down with those roots too. Reach down and reach up. And become a flower or a squash plant or whatever it is. I just decided I'm a rose. Anybody else? What kind of flower?
We're tulips.
Tulips over here. Lavender. Daylily. Anybody out there? You can be flowers too, even though you were just sunlight. Anybody? Daisies. Wonderful. Thank you for growing with us. We're going to go on with our story now and find out what else George Washington Carver did in his life, which is still about plants, but not so much about flowers.
Okay. A Weed is a Flower by Aliki. The more George thought of what he wanted to do, the more he wanted to help his people. And he remembered that his neighbors used to call him the plant doctor. He had never forgotten his love for plants. In all the years he had wandered, he always had something growing in his room. So George Washington Carver chose to study agriculture. He learned about plants, flowers, and soil. He learned the names of weeds. Even they were important to him. He often said, a weed is a flower growing in the wrong place. He still asked questions. If no person or book could answer them, he found the answers himself. He experimented with his own plants and found secrets no one knew.
When he finished college, he began to teach. He was asked to go to Alabama, where a college for black people needed his talents. It was there at the Tuskegee Institute that George Washington Carver made his life. In Alabama, Professor Carver taught his students and poor black farmers who earned their livelihood from the soil, taught them how to make their crops grow better.
Most of the farmers raised cotton, but sometimes the crops were destroyed by rain or insects, and the farmers couldn't earn enough to eat. Professor Carver told them to plant other things as well. Sweet potatoes and peanuts were good crops. They were easy to grow. He said that raising only cotton harmed the soil. It was better if different crops were planted each year. The farmers did not want to listen. They were afraid to plant peanuts and sweet potatoes. They were sure that no one would buy them.
But Professor Carver experimented in his laboratory. He found that many things could be made from sweet potatoes. He made soap, coffee, and starch. He made more than 100 things out of sweet potato. And even though people in those days called peanuts monkey food, Professor Carver said they were good for people too. Besides, he found that still even more things could be made from peanuts. Paper and ink, shaving cream, sauces, linoleum, shampoo, even milk. That's right. We had non-dairy milk a long time ago, thanks to George Washington Carver and those peanuts. In fact, he made over 300 products from the peanut. Once, when important guests were expected at Tuskegee, Dr. Carver chose the menu. The guests sat around and the table enjoyed a meal of soup, creamed mock chicken, bread, salad, coffee, candy, cake, and topped it all off with ice cream at the end. Imagine their surprise when they learned that that meal was made entirely of peanuts.
Slowly, the farmers listened to George Washington Carver. They planted peanuts and sweet potatoes. Before they knew it, these became two of the most important crops in Alabama. Soon the whole country knew about Dr. Carver and the great things he was doing. He was honored by presidents and other important people. Every day his mailbox bulged with letters from farmers and scientists who wanted his advice.
Dr. Carver was asked to speak in many parts of the world, but he didn't leave Tuskegee often. He had things to do. He continued to paint. He worked in his greenhouse and in his laboratory, where he discovered many things. He discovered that dyes could be made from plants and colors from the Alabama clay. Even when he was over 80 and close to death, he kept working. Night after night, while the rest of the town lay asleep, a light still shone in his window.
The baby born with no hope for the future grew into one of the great scientists of his country. George Washington Carver, with his goodness and devotion, helped not only his own people, but all peoples of the world.
Did anybody notice what happened, what the cotton did to the soil? Having fields and fields of cotton stripped it of nutrients over time. One of the best classes I took in undergraduate in college was an agronomy class, and we learned that many civilizations, empires would go out and conquer other peoples because they would have successful agriculture that would feed lots of people, which would increase the population, but also would strip the soil and then start to yield less, and then they needed more land. Think about that. The very wars of antiquity were about soil on one level. So it's not good to have fields and fields of one crop, fields and fields of cotton. Fields and fields of whiteness are not good for the soil. fields and fields of any one thing year after year are not good. Soil needs different plants, providing different nutrients for the soil in order for the soil to remain that ground for life. Just as our bodies need different kinds of food, right? You can't eat ice cream all the time, unfortunately, or pizza. You need many different kinds of food. Just don't eat broccoli. No, don't eat broccoli. Don't eat carrots either. No eating carrots either. Oh, okay, but I don't want you eating broccoli either. Okay, fine. What about sweet potatoes? Do you eat sweet potatoes? Peanuts? Did you know about all those things that can be made out of sweet potatoes and peanuts? Sweet potato soap? Sweet potato coffee? I know about pumpkin spice lattes, but I didn't know about sweet potato coffee. What about peanuts? Did you know paper can be made out of peanuts, and ink and shaving cream, all those things from peanuts? I mean, wow. Just wow. And you know what else can be made from peanuts? You're never going to believe this. Peanut butter. Did you know that? You did? You knew that peanuts make peanut butter? I mean, wow, that's amazing. Peanut butter can be made from peanuts. Can you believe that people didn't think that peanuts were useful? Not for eating or for other things. Just like people thought it was a waste of time for George Washington Carver to grow flowers. Just like people used to think it was a waste of time to educate girls. Did you know that? Some people still think that today. Just like people used to think it was a waste of time to educate black children. Didn't they know a whole field of white isn't good for the soil? That only planting one kind of thing leaves the soil parched and dry and lifeless? In her book, The Color Purple, writer Alice Walker says that it makes God mad when people walk by the color purple in a field and don't notice. I'm here to tell you that sweet potatoes have been the color purple. Peanuts have been the color purple. Women and girls have been the color purple and sometimes still are. Black people have been the color purple and sometimes still are. Children sometimes are the color purple. We don't value our children enough. Parents, how hard is it to raise families these days? Parents are the color purple. Elders are the color purple. Trans people are the color purple. We can go on and on. Immigrants are the color purple. Don't walk by the color purple in a field without celebrating. It makes God mad. It makes me mad. And this isn't the fake kind of don't eat broccoli don't. This is the real don't, by the way. Our book told us that a weed is a flower. George Washington Carver said a weed is a flower. He showed us that a peanut is a wonder. We need all of us, all of the diversity of all that we bring to the table, all our different gifts and talents, all our colors and textures and ways of being. If you drew a flower or made a flower out of crepe paper, will you hold it up now? Will you hold it up so we can see? And look around. Look around the room at this garden of beauty that we have created just in this short time together, symbolizing all that we're going to celebrate at our annual meeting, all the amazing things that we do as a community. So we're not quite finished, but I'm going to give the announcements at a different place in the service than usual. So I invite you to come next week to our Sunday service, which is put on by our True Accotink Colors, our LGBT group, and our Racial Justice Committee, looking at the coalescence, the interwovenness, the connections and intersections between racial justice and LGBTQ justice movement. So please join us for that. And then the following Sunday, you can come at 10 a.m. and participate in True Accotink Colors' final church discussion on our justice study action issue for this year, which is transgender justice, at 10. Not the service at 10. If you want the discussion, it'll be at 10, 2 Sundays from now. Because at 11, we're going to watch our General Assembly's closing worship service as a watch party on the screen. You can also watch that on Zoom, just like you can attend the service on Zoom today. And then Sacred Wheel is going to celebrate the solstice. And then there's Sacred Dance. So you can make a whole day out of being here 2 Sundays from now. So I invite you to show up for those things. Also, as was mentioned already, after this, members, please stay for our annual meeting. It's actually going to be a lot of fun, so stay for that. So now, we're going to conclude the 100th anniversary of the Flower Communion. So again, from the back, you're going to come up and you're going to get a different flower to take with you from the one that you placed up here, symbolizing what we bring to this community and how we share it with each other. We are the flowers for each other. So I invite you to rise for our community blessing. I just also want to share, I saw parents doing that nurturing as people were coming up and getting their flowers. Religious education, spiritual development is happening all the time.
I invite you to join me now in our community blessing, which, in honor of the Flower Communion, is going to be an adaptation of the words of David Bumbaugh that we usually say to conclude our service.
What? No, he didn't change those words for Flower Communion. It's just for today, y'all, don't worry.
All right, so listen carefully. This church is dedicated to the celebrating that all our differences make this community a beautiful bouquet of humanity, and that within this diversity is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together beyond time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that diversity within diversity.
And now that we've been nourished and nurtured by this welcoming and inclusive spiritual home, let us go out inspired to share our values in the world.